The proletariat will use its political supremacy to wrest by degree all capital from the bourgeoisie, to centralize all instruments of the production in the hands of the state, i.e. the proletariat organized as a ruling class, and to increase the total productive forces as rapidly as possible. These measures will, of course, be different in different countries. Thanks, Carl. Welcome back, comrades, to an already exciting 2021 with lots to cover and talk about. First, our studio. It looks like it took some time to get here, but we are really happy with all the upgrades we can enjoy. 2021 is going to be an exciting year for this channel, as we're going to get more in-depth into China, explore other socialist countries, and do some commentary and live streams with other YouTubers as well. First time here? Please think about subscribing to our channel and think about becoming a patron to support our message around the world. To kick off this new year, we're going to talk about probably the most important leader to not only China, but also to the modern socialist movement, Deng Xiaoping, the architect of modern China. We could say confidently that 2020 was a rough year, but China came out a true victor from it. China contained the pandemic to save millions of people, eradicated absolute poverty, went to the moon, prioritized COVID vaccines to the global south, committed to carbon neutrality, built the world's first integrated quantum communications network, and growing their economy so rapidly they cut down the time that it would take to overtake the United States as the world's largest economy from 10 years to 7 years. Deng Xiaoping laid all the foundations for such accomplishments and prosperity, all under the banner of socialism and communism.
But Bay, China has markets, commodities, billionaires, corporations, and Mao said Deng was a capitalist.
Although we already explained how these facts do not equate to capitalism in our explanation of socialism with Chinese characteristics, Deng Xiaoping and his theory add a lot more context and information on modernizing China. Additionally, I wanted to add both an expert and personal perspective to China's evolution through Deng Xiaoping by inviting a very special guest. Carl Zha hosts the Silk and Steel podcast and has an extensive background in China, both professionally and personally. He'll be giving us a personal account about what his family went through before and during Deng Xiaoping. We are going to base this video on Weiwei Zhang's ideology and economic reform under Deng Xiaoping. Professor Weiwei Zhang is a political scientist from Fudan University who used to work as an English translator for Deng Xiaoping. He has an excellent grasp of China's political system and Deng Xiaoping's motives for opening up and reforming.
I also made another prediction 6 years and a half ago. I said the United States and China both need political reforms. But in the case of China, small reforms have been going on all the time in the political system. We fix problems here and there. But I said, problem is the United States. Your political system was a product of pre-industrial era. And I made a forecast. I said, without significant, substantial political reform, my concern is, in your next elections, you will produce a leader worse off than George W. Bush.
So then,
I also supplemented with some other textbooks as well to fill in the gaps, and per usual, if I get anything wrong in good faith, please comment below and I'll make a supplemental video correcting them. With all that said, let's set the Marxist foundations for Deng Xiaoping's reforms and China's historical conditions. Is it not amazing how adaptable and flexible Marxism is? When we take a look at socialism and communism, we don't need to read theory. Although it definitely helps, please read theory. To see that, for example, the DPRK and Cuba have vastly different socialistic and communistic systems. We know very well that Marx said that socialism is a transitional period between capitalism and communism. But we also know that Engels pointed out that Marxism is a developing theory, not dogma that must be learned by repetition and mechanically repeated. Marxism clearly states that correct theories must be integrated with concrete conditions and applied to reality. However, it does not clarify the concrete features of each nation or specific plans of revolution for each country. During China's reform and opening up, Deng Xiaoping further emphasized that Marxism itself is constantly developing, and to truly integrate theory with practice, it is necessary to unify contemporary Marxism with China's real-life conditions that also undergo constant change. Whenever a capitalist or a liberal haphazardly states that China is capitalist, it is a lazy arrogance that does not grasp the Chinese struggle, conditions, and applications of Marxism. The notion that the CPC is just going with the flow to make itself rich and powerful ignores the centuries China has struggled with modernizing itself. All of this history is ignored when some liberal just states that China is capitalist because it has billionaires or corporations. This approach is dead wrong. The reason that Marxism is still relevant today after 150 years since its birth is that it always keeps up with the times, and the CPC is constantly innovating its practice. Born in August 22, 1904, Deng Xiaoping became a member of the CPC in 1923 and became a political commissar for the Red Army in rural regions. Deng Xiaoping was actually demoted in the party for standing with Mao Zedong, but was re-promoted as a revolutionary veteran for his participation in the Long March. He then continued his work under the CPC with Mao and beyond. This book lists 9 major themes that formulate Deng Xiaoping theory and explains the leader's journey in becoming the architect for modern China. But for the sake of time, I only want to focus on these 5 themes here. These 5, I believe, best summarize the struggles, triumphs, and reflection of Deng Xiaoping himself. Now, let's dive into these 5 themes of Deng Xiaoping theory. China's history is a reflection to modernize for its people. Ever since the 19th century, China has endeavored to modernize under different ideological and political systems. Western powers have exploited and weakened its system for its own gain for centuries. Western powers have exploited and weakened its system for its own gain. There were 6 political attempts to modernize China: Westernization, constitutional monarchy, democracy or republicanism, nationalism and fascism, Maoism, and finally, socialism with Chinese characteristics. This quote from Xi Jinping truly rings well after all these political systems were tried. Which ideological system a country implements depends on one crucial issue. Can this ideology resolve the historical problems facing the country? In the days when Chinese people were poor, weak, and at the mercy of others, all sorts of ideologies and theories were attempted. The capitalist road was tried and found wanting. Reformism, liberalism, social Darwinism, anarchism, pragmatism, populism, they were all given their moment on stage. They all failed to solve the problems of China's future destiny. It is Marxism-Leninism and Mao Zedong thought that guided the Chinese people out of the darkness of that long night and established a new China. It is through socialism with Chinese characteristics that China has developed so quickly. After the Chinese Revolution of 1949 and the first 5-year plan was modeled by the Soviet Union, Mao saw wasteful bureaucratic stagnation that could not uphold its continual growth and became greatly dissatisfied with what the USSR, as Khrushchev denounced Stalin and attempted to de-Stalinize Russia. Mao attempted to accelerate socialism through aggressive ideological avoidance, but productivity was met with contempt and failure. According to the book, under Mao's Great Leap Forward, quote, the most serious losses were in agriculture, where the Great Leap Forward led to an average annual fall of 9.7% in agricultural production and a major famine that caused the death of about 15 million people. In terms of loss of life, the leap may have been the worst on human record. Some scholars claim that the leap costed China almost a decade of economic growth. After the implementation of a second, more moderate 5-year plan, Mao started his Cultural Revolution, where he put forth that the development of productive forces should be subordinate to the development of correct relations in production. This ideological purity perspective led towards stagnation and decline in the economy, while people were growing extremely weary by the radicalism this campaign demanded. Technological progress became stagnant. Self-reliance prevailed over international trade. This was not the way forward towards modernization. Ideological radicals like the Gang of Four, who were Mao's top associates in the CPC, attempted to coup and overthrow Mao's own hand-picked successor, Hua Guangfei. Hua stated after the fiasco, quote, "The Gang of Four sabotaged the national economy and disrupted social construction in every field. As a result, between 1974 and 1976, the nation lost about 10 billion yuan in total value of industrial output, 28 million tons of steel, and 40 billion yuan in state revenue, and the economy was on the brink of collapse." Despite saying this, Hua only continued the dogmatism and unscientific nature of the Cultural Revolution through, and I kid you not, it's called the two whatevers. This policy pushed the party to uphold whatever Mao did and carried out whatever Mao instructed, thus the name the two whatevers. A sect within the CPC started to push back against this, quote, ultra-leftism, including Deng Xiaoping. Now, ideologically, Deng shared some of Mao's values and basics of Marxism, but was returning to a more classical version of Marxism, which emphasized the economy as the basis and its scientific methodologies, rather its utopian themes. From this, a reanalysis of China's material conditions through a dialectical and material lens led Deng and the reformists of the CPC to challenge Hua. There were other reformers that laid the foundations for such challenges as well, like Wu Yangbang, who stated that, quote, practice was the sole criterion of truth, which put forward the correct notion that everything, including Mao's theories, must be tested for the truth, which brought back the scientific nature of Marxism in an extremely dogmatic environment. Deng outright challenged Hua and his two whatevers by saying, quote, there has never been a person whose statements were all correct and who was always absolutely right. Neither Marx nor Engels put forth any whatever doctrine, nor did Lenin or Stalin, and not even Mao Zedong himself. Although the ultra-leftists attempted to discredit the reformers pushed back by promoting the fact that the extreme left neglected the basic Marxist principle that socialism should be able to create much higher productivity and hence higher standards of living than capitalism. However, it's important to note that Deng still wanted to rehabilitate Mao's legacy and legitimacy. Deng stated, "We will not do to Chairman Mao what Khrushchev did to Stalin." In 1981, the CPC adopted a resolution that labeled the Cultural Revolution as a great calamity, initiated open dialogue, issued apologies to those injured, allowed exiled members back in the CPC, and pushed major ideological reforms that promoted Deng's opening up. Initiatives like this resolution saved Mao's legacy by promoting a balanced assessment of the historical position of Mao Zedong in China's revolution and provided a scientific exposition of the definition, creation, and development of Mao Zedong thought. Deng Xiaoping initiated his reforms through prioritizing economic development over world revolution and class struggle. Despite the scare of using markets, decentralization, and other economics that were supposedly the opposite of Marxism, Deng emphasized the importance of the CPC maintaining its position as a dictatorship, eliminating bourgeois and Western elements that may push people away from socialism and communism, and reducing economic polarization. This Deng Xiaoping quote perfectly epitomizes this first theme of his own theory. China should not copy any foreign experience, even that of socialist countries. Given China's bitter experience with the Soviet model, the existing problems with the European models, and China's political culture in favor of Chinese uniqueness, it was fairly easy to reach a quick consensus that there was no fixed model for China's development, and China should explore its own approach towards modernization. After understanding all of this, let's go into the second theme of Deng Xiaoping theory, the primary stages of socialism. 1987 was a big year for China and the CPC, as Deng's opening up and reform continued a tremendous amount of growth for the economy. Be this as it may, Deng did not want to get ahead of themselves when analyzing China's transition towards socialism. It was stated in the report to the 15th National Congress of the CPC that it was the first time in the history of Marxism that the scientific concept of the primary stage of socialism was specified in a party's program. The primary stage of socialism was not a general reference to an initial stage for all socialist countries, but rather a special stage that China must experience in building socialism under the conditions of a backward productive forces and an underdeveloped commodity economy. However, this concept does not mean being content with the status quo or living being left behind, let alone allowing social evils to grow and spread. It is a starting point for seeking overall development for China to modernize and transition to a more advanced stage of socialism. From here, there are four elements to Deng's primary stage of socialism. First, socialism is an evolving process, which neither Marx nor Lenin was able to foresee so concretely in their lifetime. Leaders of the CPC asserted, "We are not in the situation envisioned by the founders of Marxism, in which socialism is built on the basis of a highly developed capitalism, nor are we in the same situation as other socialist countries. So we cannot blindly follow what a book says, nor can we mechanically imitate the examples of other countries." Second, China was still in a primary stage. Leaders stated that China's present stage of economic development was still marked by a number of factors such as low per capita GNP, a large rural population, and high illiteracy and semi-illiteracy rates. There are still large amounts of economic and human development factors that China must improve before moving forward. Third, economic development was an overriding importance for the CPC. The CPC highlighted the issue of removing poverty and backwardness as the fundamental task for this stage of the party, and defended Deng Xiaoping's thesis of primacy of economic development. And fourth, this stage was not short. It started in the 1950s and would continue in the middle of the next century, corresponding with Deng's grand goal of making China's approach the level of developing countries by 2049, the 100th anniversary of the CPC. From here, the role of the party was no longer attaining a classless society, but promoting economic development, which was identified as a fundamental and long-term interest of its proletariat. From here, let's go now to the essence of Deng Xiaoping theory. Deng Xiaoping once said, "The aim of socialism is to make all people prosperous, not create polarization." One of the features distinguishing socialism from capitalism is that socialism means common prosperity, not polarization of income. In thinking over the essence of socialism, Deng started from the basic condition that China was in the primary stages of socialism, and at the same time studied the historical experiences of success and failures of socialism in all other countries. None of the tasks of liberating and developing productive forces, eliminating exploitation and polarization, and ultimately achieving prosperity for all were solely for China in building socialism, or tasks solely for the primary stages of socialism. They are in fact goals that all socialist countries must work towards through their own socialism. Understanding this, let's move on to On a visit with Kim Il-sung, Deng stated, "We must concentrate on economic development. In a country as big and as poor as ours, if we do not try to increase production, how can we survive? How is socialism superior when our people has so many difficulties in their lives?" In November of 1979, Deng Xiaoping made the famous conclusion that socialism also requires the development of a market economy, thereby establishing the idea that economic reform must be oriented towards building a socialist market economy. Deng Xiaoping stated for the first time that we can develop a market economy under socialism, and his most well-known statement was the following: a planned economy is not equivalent to socialism because there is planning under capitalism too. A market economy is not capitalism because there are markets under socialism too. A socialist market economy is a new concept and a new system.
But the Chinese made a strategic decision over the last 50 years. They were going to open their economy to allow private enterprise, organized and started and run by Chinese citizens, but also, particularly after the 1980s, to allow foreign private capitalist enterprises, Japanese, European, American, to establish private enterprises. The Chinese government would retain final power and authority. The Chinese Communist Party would be the dominant, exclusive owner of political power over both the private and the government sectors. The government kept some industry under its own control. It is a highly organized, top-down economic system, but it allows private enterprise on a scale never seen by the Soviet Union.
It integrates the advantages of a system of public ownership with the effectiveness of the market optimizing resource allocation, both of which are indispensable and neither can be neglected. These are the statistics to growth that came after these market reforms. As you can plainly see, China's economic trajectory has always been on growth, even to today, where they still grew 2.3% despite COVID. Other market-oriented policies included special economic zones, foreign investment, and peaceful development. Along with pointing towards our video to socialism with Chinese characteristics, to understand a bit more about these market aspects, we want to create a separate video on this and China's economy. Reshifting back to Deng Xiaoping, he summarized all this to both embrace and defend socialism with Chinese characteristics by stating, no matter to what degree we open up to the outside world and admit foreign capital, its relative magnitude will be small and it can't affect our system of socialist public ownership of the means of production. Absorbing foreign capital and technology, and even allowing foreigners to construct plants in China can only play a complementary role to our effort to develop the productive forces in a socialist society. Of course, this will bring some decadent capitalist influences into China. We are aware of this possibility. It is nothing to be afraid of. With all these challenges towards Marxism, you can clearly see how some die-hard communists can say that this is just dressed-up capitalism or revisionism and not true communism. But we have to remember what Deng Xiaoping was doing here when pushing for his opening up and reform. This was a brand new, never attempted before system for the purpose of developing China's productive forces. And he crafted these reforms using dialectical materialism, historical materialism, scientific socialism, and Leninist theory. You know, I saw this meme on a Gonzaloist website claiming that Deng Xiaoping attempted to destroy socialism by pointing towards the USSR, which collapsed, and Mao's Great Leap Forward and Cultural Revolution as successes, which we now know they were not, while pushing the notion that China is committing social imperialism by providing loans to developing countries, which is somehow equivalent to Western corporate death squads under Lenin's definition of imperialism, which has been thoroughly debunked in a couple of other videos. One thing that this meme fails to address is Deng's 4 cardinal principles. As we know, the 4 cardinal principles refer to upholding the socialist road, the people's democratic dictatorship, the leadership of the CPC, and Marxism-Leninism and Mao Zedong thought. The 4 cardinal principles provide a fundamental prerequisite and political guarantee for China's socialist modernization. This was in response to an erroneous trend of doubting socialism and the dictatorship by combating bourgeois Western liberalism. If Deng was so capitalist, why didn't he go down the path of, let's say, Gorbachev and give up on communism? Why didn't he join Khrushchev in denouncing Mao and abolishing the dictatorship of the proletariat? Why didn't he join the liberals in pushing for Western democratic reforms in 1989? Those leftists that falsely alleged Deng to intentionally plant capitalism in China failed to grasp this very important element in his theory. As the book notes, Deng's deference of Marx and Mao should not be simply regarded as a tactic for placating the conservatives in the party. Deng indeed saw himself as a defender of Mao's philosophical framework. Deng's own experience as an army commander and strategist during the war led him to share many of Mao's assumptions, such as an analysis of principal contradictions, a conscious effort emphasizing on fundamental and long-term perspectives, and constantly relating tactics to strategies. Deng Xiaoping stated, "No criticism of the party should go beyond certain limit," and he did not tolerate political dissent. Deng found the dictatorship is indispensable to socialism and must be defended at all cost. He found the dictatorship protects against capitalistic and pro-Western political dissent, which was extremely important for his opening up and reform. Deng also stated bourgeois liberalism would plunge this country into turmoil once more. If party leadership were abolished, there would be no center around which to unite our 1 billion people, and the party itself would lose all power to fight, and China would be reduced to a heap of loose sand. Despite his push for the government to take a macroeconomic approach rather than a centralized microeconomic approach in markets, Deng was unrelenting in upholding these 4 cardinal principles and destroying Western and liberal influences in China. There were many instances where Deng personally distanced himself and even exiled liberal members of the CPC because of their pro-capitalist advocacy. This quote from Deng probably says it best. We should criticize and oppose the tendency to worship capitalism and to advocate bourgeois liberalism. We should criticize and oppose the decadent bourgeois ideas of doing everything solely for profit, seeking an advantage at the expense of others, and always putting money first. We should criticize and oppose anarchism and ultra-individualism. With Deng Xiaoping's Marxist and scientific methods, his creation of the 4 cardinal principles created a party more ideologically disciplined than the USSR's after Stalin, especially when upholding the dictatorship of the proletariat. After talking a bird's eye view about Deng Xiaoping and Deng Xiaoping theory, we know the politics now, we know the background now, but we don't know the personalized stories of the Chinese people. And we have a very, very special guest here, Charles Zha, who knows basically the ins and outs of the history of China, culture, system, and whatnot. And I invited him today to talk about his familial and personal experiences in China, growing up in China, whether it was under Mao, Deng Xiaoping, and how he sees the development today. Welcome, Carl. How's it going? Go ahead and introduce yourself.
Hi, I'm Carl. I was born and raised in China in the 1980s. So I was born 1 month after Mao died. So my childhood growing up in China in 1980s China, I experienced the firsthand the Deng Xiaoping era. And I came to US in 1990 to join my family. My dad was one of the first generation of Chinese students after the opening and reform to go abroad, and he studied electrical engineering in US and in 1985. And so I joined him in 1990, and my family chose to stay in the United States. So I grew up there. I went to high school, college. And I was since 1990. Now it's 2020, so that's about like 30 years.
30 years.
Well, yeah. I was born right after the death of Mao, so I didn't personally experience the Cultural Revolution, but I grew up with stories told in my family because these are experienced by my grandparents and my parents. You know, a lot of people. Like a lot of Western media pundits say, oh, you know, China, they don't teach about Cultural Revolution. They, you know, the Chinese youth are not aware what happened. That's not true, because I don't need to go to school to learn about Cultural Revolution. I learned firsthand from the stories handed down in my family. So my family, both of my grandparents, they were highly supportive of the Communist Revolution toward the end of the Chinese Civil War, as majority of the Chinese people, because at that time, after 8 years of fighting the Japanese, most of the Chinese populace just wanted peace. They wanted to return to normalcy. But Chiang Kai-shek, in pursuit of total power, he waged this very unpopular civil war against the communists. And by 1949, when they see that Chiang Kai-shek was losing the war, they actually see the communists as a possible they saw it as a force for change, right? Because whatever it was happening before, it wasn't working. Before under the warlords era, and then under the Chiang Kai-shek's reign, and then under the Japanese puppet government, they had enough. They wanted change, and the communists represented the force for change. According to my grandpa's, life was good in the early 50s. So in the immediate aftermath of founding of People's Republic of China, because one important factor is the war finally ended. After 1911, after the overthrow of Qing dynasty, China was been in various level of conflict, right, for the last 40 years. And finally, that's coming to an end, and the economy was starting to recover. And then in 1957, the anti-rightist campaign started. So this is a time when Mao's, in preparation for Great Leap Forward, he was a greater collectivization and nationalizing economy, which are good, was very good. But my grandma was smart. So in 1950s, when they asked you to voluntarily fill out your class background, my grandma filled out her father is an urban professional because he was a doctor. right even though her father's family was this great landlord, and his brother was a police chief. But my grandpa, my mother's father, he cared more about faith. So even though originally he came from a landlord family, but the family lost their fortune, so he had to start from the bottom, like washing dishes and being apprenticed to a chef. But instead of writing that, when they asked for the class background, he wrote landlord.
Oh, okay. Shoot.
Yeah, because he wasn't thinking. He wasn't thinking about the implications. So what happened when the anti-rightist campaign started? Well, he has landlord background. He worked in a KMT affiliated factory. He was accused of corruption by his own teachers.
Right.
He was sent to a re-education through labor camp. And his family lost income because he's no longer the school principal. But luckily, thankfully my grandma, she before all this happened, she was also for the first generation of Chinese women to get a modern education. When she went through high school, one of her teacher was a communist, and I think her teacher liked her and told her that he was going to the communist base in Yan'an, right, which was a popular thing to do among the leftist progressives, and asked her to go with him. And my grandma also had a crush on her teacher, and so she almost went. But my great grandma find out, and her only daughter was gonna elope with some the communist teacher to the communist base. So she put a stop to that by quickly arranged her a marriage with my grandpa. And so straight out of high school, my grandma was 18. She got married, and then my grandpa told her, look, you can stay home and raise kids, be a traditional Chinese woman. And my grandma's, but this is right around the time of founding of PRC, and women's liberation is a big thing. My grandma's like, no, I want to go to school. I want to pursue a college education. So she went to a teacher's college, and where she got a teacher certificate, and she became a teacher. And because of that, when my grandpa lost his job and got sent to the labor camp, my grandma supported the entire family. The 5 kids.
Interesting.
It's the aftermath of anti-rightist campaign, Great Leap Forward. I think that's when Deng Xiaoping has different evaluation of Mao's policies, and that's why in the early 60s, him and Liu Shaoqi kind of decided to ease off on this fast track to communism approach started by Mao. In the early 60s, after the Great Leap Forward and the famine, there was a brief time of relaxation when there was a time when Marshal Chen Yi when publicly said, a person's worth should not be determined by their parents. Like a person should be able to make their own path. That's right around the time my dad graduated high school, and to his surprise and joy, he was allowed to apply to college. So my dad is a couple years older than my mom.
Okay.
So by the time my mom graduated high school, Cultural Revolution already started. So this would be 1966. Again, my mom, even though she was a top student in her class, well liked by her teachers, she was not given the option to go to college because that was just because my grandpa was a rightist, quote unquote.
Right.
So at this time, my mom was actually a Red Guard. She was very she wanted to cut off her family ties. She went through. She went home and she criticized. In school she criticized her dad, her mom, and she went home. She went through all my my grandpa's old photos. So my grandparents' wedding photo, my grandpa was wearing a Western suit, right? And by the time of Cultural Revolution, Western suit is considered too bourgeois. That's bourgeois. So that's bad. And so my mom cut up the wedding picture of my grandparents.
Oh wow!
But this is a common story during Cultural Revolution. A lot of the Chinese children, they were denouncing their own parents. In the end, my mom, despite her, professed love of Chairman Mao and denouncing her own parents, my mom still wasn't allowed to go to college, and she was so she went to a nursing school, which was like a 2-year nursing school. Afterwards, in the month I was born, the PLA general Ye Jianyin and the Mao successor Hua Guofeng basically arrested the Gang of Four, right? And then put an end to the Cultural Revolution. And and after that, in 1978. Deng Xiaoping was rehabilitated. Then in 1978, what Deng Xiaoping and Hu Yaobang had done was to reopen the schools. So now the colleges are open again. Now they're redoing the college entrance exam. All the Chinese youth who have been sent to the countryside, now they can go take the college entrance exam and go back to college or go to college.
Okay.
And my dad capitalized on the opportunity to apply to grad school. And because of my mom is from a city of Chongqing, so he applied to the Chongqing University.
Were you surprised on how developed China is now ever since Deng Xiaoping came into power?
I will tell you, back when I was in the first grade, in 1982 with my classmate, we used to talk about what the future would hold, what the future would look like. But as little boys, we were saying, now that the opening and reforming is happening on all fronts, right? By the time we grow up, that we would even do PDA in public, would you hold hands and kiss in public? And that was unimaginable in 1982, right? Now it's just normal for Chinese
Sure.
Yeah, in 1982, that would be whoa, that would be the ultimate. We get to hold hands and kiss and make out in public. One of the things Deng Xiaoping pointed out, which is very important, is he said, socialism would fail if we fail to provide for our people, if we fail to provide a good life for our people. Because he realized that, through the different political campaigns from anti-rightist campaign, Great Leap Forward through Cultural Revolution, people are getting tired of ideological struggles. They just most people just want better life. And how to prove that socialism is really superior to the capitalism is to do better, to provide better life for your people. And that's
improve their material conditions, improve their prosperity.
Exactly. That's very key because in the initial phase of reform and opening, it was very shocking to the Chinese population because throughout from Great Leap Forward throughout Cultural Revolution, my mom's generation, they have been told that people in the West, they live in 水深火热之中, which means in fire and water, they're between fire and water, and we are, in China, where really empowers the workers and the peasants, but then they see how people live in U.S. They see the difference, the gap in the living standard, and that produced a shock. But on the other hand, it also motivated the Chinese people of that generation to play catch up, to learn at one point, to learn from the West, to learn the technology, to learn the different way of doing things, but with the goal to close the gap, to really make China a better place. I think that's very important, and that has happened in the last 40 years, what we have seen.
I think the ending paragraph of this textbook says it best. In view of the history of Marxism, if one may say that the establishment of Marxism by Marx and Engels transformed socialism from utopian thinking into science, Leninism changed scientific socialism from theory into a real system, and Mao Zedong thought led China in successfully establishing a socialist system via a new democracy revolution. Then Deng Xiaoping theory helped China blaze a new path of its own in building socialism, breaking down the dominant pattern of the Soviet Union and opening up a new world characterized by diversity in development models. Deng Xiaoping theory is both a continuation and development of Marxism-Leninism and Mao Zedong thought, and is a Marxist theory for present-day China. Comrades, let me tell you that this video only skims the surface of Deng Xiaoping and his theory. In all honesty, reading about his efforts in Hong Kong and other things really made me understood and become less critical of China today. China has made tremendous strides to become the powerhouse it is today, and the basis of that was because of Deng Xiaoping's reforms. With all this said, I highly recommend watching our China playlist here to learn more about China's ideology and system. Please don't forget to subscribe, and thank you everybody for joining, and solidarity.